Okay, awesome. So Tori, I'm gonna start by reading your bio, which is amazing. I want everybody to know about all of your incredible accomplishments. Um, Tori Potenza is a queer writer, historian, horror academic, and body horror enthusiast. You can find their writing at Movie John, Slay Away With Us, Cul-de-sac of Blood, and Hear Us Scream. Now, Tori, I know you write and speak a lot about horror. So is there anything else that you want to add that you've done since we first got your bio, or any projects you're really excited about right now that you want to share with us?
Yeah, so I've written a few pieces for Certified Forgotten so far on like some lesser known like erotic thrillers of the 90s and the 2000s, which has been really fun. And I also wrote a piece on The Hitcher and Christine as like queer horror movies for Horror Press in honor of Pride Month. Um,
Oh,
yeah.
that sounds incredible.
I love those movies. I'll mention
Yeah,
at
me
Christine
too.
actually. So,
I
um,
just saw Christine for the first time recently, and holy shit, I don't know how I
I
missed it, but
I feel like it's a movie where you're just like, oh, it's a killer car movie. It's really silly, and then you watch it and you're like, oh, it's so much more interesting, and it gets better on like every rewatch.
yeah, absolutely. And I heard like a while back that Brian Fuller was thinking of doing a remake, which would be incredible.
Yeah, it
But
really
I'm
would.
so happy. Yeah, I'm so happy that you are doing more publications. And Tori's piece on Possessor is fantastic. I'll share it with you in a little bit after Tori's presentation. But yes, we're so happy to have you here and so honored to publish your work. And when you're ready, I'll let you start with your lecture.
Awesome. Okay, so I will share my screen. Okay, let me get the right slideshow. Oop, not the right one. There
Now it
we
looks
go.
perfect. Oh,
All right,
there we go.
perfect. So thank you, Ariel, so much. I am so thrilled to be included among so many talented people in the launch of Bloodletter. Additionally, I just want to thank you again for letting me be a complete heathen tonight with this talk, Possession by the Invisible Hand. Capitalism is the devil. This is going to go to some weird places, so please just stick with me as we go along on this journey. I won't give too much of a discussion on the possession and film in general, assuming a lot of people have like a basic understanding, at least if you've seen it in film. And yesterday, if you missed your Grains talk, she gave like a really incredible overview on possession in film. So definitely check that out when it's available. But the idea of possession can be found throughout histories, cultures, and continents. In Western society, with its Christian roots, many of these stories focus on the Christian idea of demonic possession. Within these stories, we see a lot of people who are shown as being susceptible to demonic infestation, often are people who are more vulnerable or marginalized populations in our culture, which we'll dive into a little bit later. But mainly, I am here today to discuss Possessor, the film that I wrote my Bloodletter essay on, and also how capitalism plays a role in that movie, as well as other types of possession narratives. This will be loose in terms of references to demonic and sinister forces and possession, and also some more general ones that just talk about possession as the concept of like not having control over oneself. So when I decided to pitch something to Bloodletter, I wanted to think of something a little outside the scope of Christian possession tales. And so I thought about Brandon Cronenberg's 2020 film Possessor, because it has the word in the name. And this is maybe my third or fourth time writing about this movie because there are just so many different elements and facets of the story that you can pull different themes from. What I explored in the piece was how opposed to malevolent, otherworldly presences taking over someone's body. In this film, it is another person. Tasia Voss is the main character, and she is a person that has her own anxieties, histories, fears, emotions, all of which she brings into this other body that she inhabits. The way this uses possession as a storytelling device brings forth questions about the psyche, human nature, and identity, which brings in some different philosophical musings compared to traditional possession tropes. Another aspect of the film I just really love is how Brandon Cronenberg uses visual ways to emulate internal and psychological transformations, which you can see in this picture here is showing the two people kind of sharing this body and struggling within it. So my piece touches on the idea of who is really possessed in the film itself. But after I wrote it, I continued to think about how in this film, almost everyone is driven and in many ways possessed in a different way, maybe even a sneakier, more malevolent force than what we would consider the devil, that being capitalism. Possessor takes place in an alternate 2008 where any claims to privacy have all but disappeared. The possession technology is used by Voss and her organization to possess people and use that in their assassinations. Her duty is to carry out this corporate espionage and assassinations by infiltrating other people's bodies, ones that are considered disposable within a capitalist society. Tasha is a selfish creature, and while she is profoundly affected by the possession process, she, gets to know these people that she is sharing a body with, but ultimately doesn't show remorse for what she does or the trail of bodies she leaves in her wake. Another way possession is shown through the depictions of everyday workers. It illustrates how people are used as puppets by the capitalist system. This is showcased really well in a scene where Voss, who is inhabiting Colin's body, goes to work at a big conglomerate, which is very clearly Amazon when you look at this movie and the text that's there. They're all dressed in these drab uniforms and quickly file in like good worker bees. There is no real occasion to socialize with coworkers because as soon as they are on duty, they have to put on their VR headset and log into their virtual desk and workspace. You can see in these pictures how everyone is sitting really tightly together with these headsets on, and they don't even get the basic amenities of like a laptop and desk and privacy in this world. They are very simply cogs in a machine. Even this is layered as Colin's job is data mining and involves invading the privacy of others to see what products they have in their house. We see him peek in as people are having sex and going about their business, unaware that a person is watching them. Similarly, his supervisor can watch him and see how much work he is getting done and constantly monitoring those tasks, almost like a god peeping into other people's lives. No one is hired on their ability, personality, or skills. They are not individuals. They are simply part of this corporate machine. Another way we see capitalism possession comes from Voss and her possession of other people's bodies. All people that are offered up and deemed disposable enough to be possessed and killed by this, which brings to mind for me a lot the Obsolete Man episode of The Twilight Zone. We only see two people utilized for these missions. The first is in the opening scene where a woman named Holly is possessed by Tasia. She is described as a hostess, but we see the other woman at the party she's at are wearing the same uniform as her, and they're seen talking and flirting with people. So it does allude to this being some kind of sex work, paid companionship, or like party girl kind of paid situation. Voss is in control of this woman's body and murders a man and then lets the woman die in a shootout with the police. The second person that we see her possess is Colin, who we spend the majority of the film with. He is chosen because of his close proximity to their rich target, but also because he does not do much except party. He has no real connections, value, works this meaningless job, and has no real monetary value. Both of these people are seen as disposable under capitalism, as are most workers. Someone can easily fill the space at that party or be the person taking over Colin's virtual desk. Now, to ease into my favorite aspect of this possession and possessor is this quote from John Maynard Keynes, an English economist who lived from 1883 to 1946, and seems ahead of his time with this quote. Capitalism is the astonishing belief that the nastiest motives of the nastiest men somehow or other work for the best results in the best of all possible worlds. Which is how we see this bigger theme of how capitalism rewards monsters. Capitalism has its dirty little money-grubbing tendrils all over this movie. It is a sinister paranormal force looming all over the happenings of the film. The events that go on in Possessor simply feel like one of many horrors that could take place in this world that Brandon Cronenberg creates. A world where freedom is all but gone and corporations reign supreme. Another way this shows up is in regards to Voss's relationship with her job. She and her boss Girder have a toxic relationship. Girder tells Voss that she is special and that she is being groomed to take over for Girder when she retires. She encourages Voss to cut ties with her family and continue working, even though she can see that Voss's mental health is degrading as the events of the movie continue. Girder manipulates Voss and acts as a puppet master in the climax of the film, wanting her to have no real connections or life outside of her job. When she says, "You have a special nature, one we've worked to unlock," it is easy to wonder if Voss was always this cold-blooded, or if, in order to survive in a capitalist state, she had to become this killer to survive. I've certainly worked in toxic work environments where bosses have upheld certain dynamics in a much less extreme sense, although Voss reminds me very much of a past manager I had. But she pushes Voss away from things like motherhood, marriage, and other social ties because in order for her to be a successful assassin, she cannot balance all of those together. Work has to be everything. It brings to mind how people have a tendency to identify themselves based on their job and therefore their productivity. Even when we try to get to know people, oftentimes the thing we say is, "Where do you work? What do you do?" Putting all those other complexities and facets of their humanity on the back burner. It's no wonder we feel guilty when we are sick or burnt out because we are wired to feel valued based on our productivity. People put their whole selves into work, overtime, working weekends, blurring those lines between work-life balances, something on par with the most devout religious people as well. It fills a void in an increasingly secular world. Recent television shows like Severance have done a really fantastic job of highlighting how a late-stage capitalist society could have corporations become the new churches, where people are bowing down and worshiping at the altar of their CEOs. With stories like companies like Lululemon, who have tried to instill an almost cult-like idealism in their employees, it does not seem that far-fetched. In a poignant scene at the end of Possessor that mirrors one earlier in the film, Voss holds up a preserved butterfly that she killed and mounted when she was a child. She used to say that she felt bad for killing it. But at the end, she no longer says that. She no longer feels that guilt. And we see Girder smile with approval at this development. She becomes a full-fledged, cold-blooded killer that Girder wanted her to be, which sends us the message that capitalism rewards monsters. In the end, Voss succeeds in the capitalist hellscape because she embraces her monstrous side. When we get into capitalist horror, we see these themes pop up a lot. The Pinku film Brain Sex, American Psycho, Nightcrawler, and Fresh are all examples of films that show people doing evil, and being rewarded handsomely. Considering we live in a world where people like Trump and Musk amass wealth while being the most horrible of men, again, this isn't that far of a stretch from the imagination. Well, some people try to follow the ingrained Protestant work ethic of working hard and that'll bring rewards and everything you need. We see who really succeeds with these sort of narratives. This ties Possessor and other films like it into the subgenre of capitalist horror, which you can see a couple examples of here. It's certainly nothing new, and although it is becoming a much larger part of the horror landscape, Brandon Cronenberg's 3 feature films have all dealt with it in various ways. Antiviral shows us a future where people who are obsessed with celebrities can go to companies and actually buy celebrity diseases and be infected with them. And Infinity Pool shows a world where the rich do not need to face consequences for their actions, and we see the extremes of how resort culture destroys communities. While most possession films would not be considered capitalist horror, what interests me are the different ways we see capitalism represented in possession films. It's this invisible influence over everyone, often being as elusive and unseen as the devil or even God in these films. The second part of my talk will provide an array of possession films or possession adjacent films, some religious, some not, but they all have that invisible hand of capitalism on them in some way or another. Much like this George Orwell quote, the Lord of all, the money god, who rules us blood and hand and brain, which I also like because it kind of blurs those lines between the devil and God. One interesting theme I have seen in several possession films is that, especially the ones that focus on more Christian lore, are those that are the most susceptible to evil are often those who are suffering economically. Similarly to those targeted in Possessor, these people are deemed as non-essential because they lack means. In some cases, it is even a point of the film that they are unable to move away from the evil that is haunting them and their families because they don't have the means to leave that space. Additionally, several of these films also have some themes around families being susceptible who have single mothers, second marriages, or are widows. So a few of the examples here. Onibaba, which I just watched recently, is really interesting in that way. People who are bordering on starvation, living in these huts while a war rages in the backdrop of the movie, and they are besieged upon by these evils while they are trying to survive. Both The Conjuring 1 and 2 have highlighted families that are usually bigger families, either buying a home that they're trying to refurbish with little means, or in the second one, we see a single mother raising 4 kids in a really run-down home in the UK. Spanish language film Veronica, also working class family, deceased father, and newer to this, Evil Dead Rise, where we see a family living in a rundown apartment complex that doesn't look like it has been updated in ages. So even before the evil shows up, it is already this dank, terrifying place that people are living in. Again, these are not always overt or even really spoken about, but they do play a role in what happens to the characters as well as their susceptibility to possession. Thinking on US history with things like slavery, segregation, women's rights, labor movement, we can see a correlation between those who have been disenfranchised by capitalist systems. These battles have long been fought over and continue to be fought over for those who are marginalized and trying to fight for equality. As they are susceptible to poverty and other issues, they are also susceptible to possession. We see this with the taking of Deborah Logan, which is a good example of older people and populations, people suffering from things like dementia, Alzheimer's. Jennifer's Body, where we see women in general who usually thought of being susceptible to evil, especially in more of like witchcraft narratives. And also specifically in this one, a woman who is seen as promiscuous within a patriarchal system. Get Out, we see this happening with Black people in another way that white people are trying to use them and their bodies for their own means. Christine, where we see a boy who is looked at as being emasculated, weak, and even coded as queer. The Old Ways, a newer movie that features a woman who is Hispanic and also has a dependency on drugs. And then I also included Slacks in this because I think it's a really interesting inverse of this story, where an Indian girl who is killed picking cotton for a clothing brand possesses a pair of jeans and wreaks havoc on the people that are working at the store. And so it really highlights the ways that child labor, fast fashion, have utilized these populations of international people and also non-white populations for monetary gain. Body snatcher movies are kind of a subgenre on their own, but have a lot of these same possession themes because their themes are often in relation to conformity and free thinkers and those who are kind of deemed as outsiders. In order for the system to continue uninterrupted, these people must become productive members of society with some slight brain adjustment or bodily possession. Then they can come back into the fold and be these upstanding citizens that are productive in a capitalist society. Invasion of the Body Snatchers is really the blueprint for this, but many of them use alien invaders as kind of the means for what's going on. But films like Disturbing Behavior and Stepford Wives focus more on humans who find a way to alter one's brain or replace those who don't fit in. In one case, it is a woman who doesn't fit into a conformity model of traditional family values. And in Disturbing Behavior, it's students who are troublemakers and seen as problematic in some way. In oppressive systems like this, these people do not fly for the most part because they are potentially the revolutionaries, the rabble rousers, and therefore systems like the patriarchy and capitalism want to squash this out and turn everyone into good worker bees. I just watched a great documentary at a Fantastic Fest called So Unreal that does a deep dive into tech films from Tron to The Matrix, and it brings up the idea that with progress in technology, the question is always, how can we make money off of this? Capitalism and other systems that oppress thrive when workers are docile and happy. It is no surprise that we live in a world now where we have strikes going on because of the fear that companies will replace them with AIs. Capitalism wants to do everything it can to progress and move forward, even if that means leaving us behind. This helps maintain power, uphold conformity, and cut out any of the annoying ethical questions we have. Films like The Matrix, great example, just this picture alone of Neo waking up and seeing everyone connected and conformed within this Matrix system. There's a newer indie film called Empathy Inc. that utilizes VR technology guised as a way to help people empathize with those that are less fortunate than them, but is ultimately used as a tool to weed out some of those populations that are deemed a drain on society. Videodrome, we see this even just with a simple videotape inserted into the main character. He is able to become a weapon of destruction. Equilibrium, all art and emotion and individualism is repressed and outlawed, and people take a drug to suppress those emotions and that piece of them that is essential to their humanity in order to survive under this oppressive system. And then Repo Man, which offers a world where tech has given us the ability to have life-saving organs that extend people's lives, but sold at an astronomical price that people cannot pay and oftentimes are killed because of that. So Possessor offers an interesting opportunity to look at the idea of possession in a unique way, a way that lets us look at the larger systems and principles that guide our lives. Much like religion has for many guided how they act, what they do, even what they eat, capitalism similarly is a man-made creation that dictates the ways we are able to live our lives. It offers the opportunity to look at possession as a plot device and how it is used in various ways that tie to capitalism, the patriarchy, and conformity. In a world that is increasingly cruel to our most marginalized and susceptible, while the rich continue to get richer, it is clear that these systems are parasitic, much like the demons that possess people in classic possession films. And while we are focused on demons, AI, and other terrifying forces, we should remember that the invisible force that is often unnamed in these films is capitalism. Um, Even religion itself seems to be corrupted by capitalism, with things like megachurches and tax exemption, with many good religious folks preying upon and weaponizing their beliefs. So when even the institutions that people historically look to for help are corrupt, where can we find our saviors and an exorcist who can exorcise the capitalist demon from our lives? And that is me. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tori. That was incredible. So well articulated and argued. I mean, man, I feel like I just learned so much. I was thinking about the idea of horror as a kind of catharsis. I know a lot of us horror fans love horror because it offers like a cathartic experience, like rape revenge films, for example. And I know I was thinking about many of the movies that you mentioned, and I it seems as though a lot of these like capitalism, these commentaries on capitalism don't actually have cathartic endings, which I think is really fascinating. Um, what do you think about that?
Yeah, you're right, because I think I am one of those people that looks to horror oftentimes for some sort of catharsis. And I think with Possessor, I think I find a different kind of catharsis, not necessarily in the capitalist tones, but I don't know, this idea of this woman who frees herself from the bonds of like marriage and motherhood because she doesn't want to be a part of it anymore and becomes this monstrous person, like thinking about the monstrous feminine and like Barbara Creed's work, that's something that I really gravitate towards. But you're right, like a lot of these films are a little bleaker, a little darker. And so I feel like sometimes I have to be in the right mood for those too, because I do like the, you know, there are other movies like when we talk about capitalist horror, like Ready or Not, like some of those smaller pieces where you get to have the like, yeah, she like beat them in the end, but yeah, that's not that's not really here. But I appreciate that it is like naming a lot of the like unnamed that we just deal with all the time in our lives, especially as I'm seeing more films and TV that are looking into like what it is to like be a part of the workforce now, because sometimes it does seem just insane. We continue to like do this day to day.
That's a great point. Like maybe the catharsis is in identification, that we actually see our realities reflected back to us, but like the volume is turned up to 10 in terms of the violence. It's not so insidious, it's externalized, and therefore we kind of get a little bit of a release from seeing it so sort of laid bare in front of us. I think that that's really astute. I'm just wondering too, like in a more broad context, what draws you to horror? What kinds of horror movies are your favorite? Was there like a moment in time when horror began to really captivate you? I always just think it's fascinating when that sort of light turned on for a lot of us.
Yeah, I mean, horror feels like such a huge part of my life now, but sometimes it makes me feel like a fraud because I came to horror like much later in life, like in my early 20s. So I feel like I've only been like a full-fledged horror fan for like 10 plus years. But a lot of that had to do with like moving to a new city and not really having a lot of connections and like realizing that I had like anxiety and depression and some of these like mental health issues and really found I don't know, like catharsis in watching some of these movies play out. Like even my dad makes fun of me because he hates slashers. It's like his least favorite of like the horror movie like subgenres. But I'm always like, yeah, but like I do kind of like the fact that I know the tropes. I like know what's gonna happen, and it's also this like contained scary thing that gets me out of my own anxiety, and I just get to like watch other people's anxiety.
Yeah, it's like a roller coaster. Like you
Yeah.
can see the drop coming and then you know it's going to end and you're going to get off the ride.
Yep. Exactly.
That's, but yeah, that's so fascinating that it kind of occurred later for you. I mean, 10 plus years is not that recent.
Yeah.
but, but yeah, I think often it's like triggered by a life event or a change that kind of allows these things in into our brains in a way that are unexpected. Are there any recent movies that you've seen that we should know about that you're really excited about?
Oh, there's so many. One movie that I've like really been pushing people to check out is one called The Passenger that stars Kyle Gallner. I'm a huge fan of Kyle Gallner in general, but it was one that has like a lot of restorative justice themes that were like played out
Hmm.
really beautifully, and it actually was like really emotional and heartfelt, and so it was just like very unique as a horror film. Um, Also this year too, New Religion, which is a like body horror movie from a first time Japanese director. I believe it's on Screenbox right now, and it's a lot of themes around like metamorphosis, which is a theme that I'm really drawn to in film too. And then also Sick of Myself. It's a Scandinavian like body horror comedy that's like just great dry humor and social commentary about like influencer culture and all of these other things. Yeah.
Amazing. You go deep. You've got a lot of good recommendations.
It's my favorite thing to do is give recommendations.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Um, well, I love to show people where they can find your piece. I'm gonna share my screen. Tori's piece is just, as you can tell, Tori is so articulate and describes these conditions so beautifully. I really encourage you all to read the full essay. I think one of the things that's so spectacular about this piece is the way that you really tie a lot of themes of possession to this larger theme of capitalism so seamlessly. And I'm like, by the end of the essay, I'm completely convinced of your argument and that there's something like inherently capitalist to possession films. I think is really true. I think that we're all possessed by capitalism, of course, but Possessor is such a beautiful case study that I think you really opened up and made me see in a different light. I've always been a little bit more of a David Cronenberg person, and Brandon kind of always like slipped by the radar. But when I read your piece, I actually went back and rewatched the film, and you made me like it a lot more. So I can't give you a higher compliment than that.
Thank you so much.
Is there any, does anybody have any questions or want to add anything? Or Tori, is there anything that you want to add?
Not really,
Not to
just
put you on
thank
the
you.
spot, you can totally say no. Okay, amazing.
Thank you for
Thank you
letting me
so
talk about
much.
these crazy things.
No, thank you. And yeah, I agree with Sarah. It was so fascinating and brilliant and just like beautifully articulated. And you make a really damn fine PowerPoint presentation, my friend. That was beautiful.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course. Okay, let's see, Sarah. We have our next presenter. Sarah, I know that you're expecting Aisha to come on in, but we did. Aisha's not able to join
I'm
us. Do
here.
you feel ready? Hi, I'm so happy to see you.
I'm happy to see you too. Yeah, yeah, we can go for it.
Okay, amazing. So Sarah wrote a gorgeous, gorgeous poem called Minnow that I absolutely adore and fell in love with immediately as soon as I read it. And Sarah has such a complex and incredible art practice. I'm going to read your bio so that people can get familiar with your work. Sarah Esmi is an Iranian American mother, writer, collage artist, producer, director, and lawyer. It's a lot of incredible things, Sarah. Her writing has been published in Talix. Am I saying that right? Okay,
I think so,
Talix.
yeah.
I'm okay. Time Show Review, The Rising Phoenix Review, The San Pedro River Review, Soundings East. Tell me if I'm fucking this up. Papachu? I hope.
I think
Papachu
it's
Press.
Papiacho.
Papiachu. Okay, that sounds better. And produced at venues such as Dixon Place and Abrams Arts Center. After receiving a Fulbright Award, she dedicated 7 years to public interest law, including representing clients in immigration court, on death row in Louisiana, in Brooklyn Criminal Court, and later in psychiatric units throughout New York City. Sarah is co-founder of Counterclaim and currently leads the More Art Fellowship program, for which she offers writing workshops, open studios, and moderation of artist talks to public and socially engaged artists. Guest speaking credits include NYU and CUNY. Is that yeah, okay. I never have actually known if that's right. So thank you. Sarah is also a graduate of the mindfulness-based stress reduction program developed by John Kabat-Zinn and a trained facilitator. So Sarah is multi-talented, as you can tell. And we're so lucky to have her and to publish her beautiful piece. Sarah, is there anything that I forgot to mention or that you've done since I got your bio that you want to call out?
I don't. I think since I submitted that bio, I've kind of phased out of my work at More Art, and I'll be kind of pivoting back to my legal practice for a little bit. But that's like just an update. It's not necessarily an edit.
No, that's an exciting update. Wow, amazing. And
Yeah.
also, for those of you interested, Sarah, afterwards, let's definitely put a link to Counterclaim in the chat because Sarah
Oh, sure.
also has an incredible digital literary magazine that you should all check out. Another
Yeah.
beautiful piece of online poetry collecting that I highly, highly recommend.
Thanks. Do you want me to go
All
ahead
right,
and
so
read?
whenever you're ready.
Yeah, my connection's a little spotty, so feel free to just stop me if you can't hear me or it's choppy.
You're perfect on my end.
Okay. All right. Minnow, after Judgment Call by Amber Flame. You are sure that your story is different. We're just downstairs, they said. That hallway of your childhood home, a grave. How it splays itself before you like the black of an alley. You swear you hear eggshells. You swear your scanning eyes see a figure, big, bad cumulonimbus charging at you from the other end of this bare desert. And then again, over your shoulder, you are all rod and no cone. This is the back street, they say, to avoid. Never knowing when the boy will be let loose, to bound around a corner, mouse eyes ravenous for understanding, knuckles like apples, your rib cage smashing itself against underwire. You are instructed to keep your hair tied back, to never say no, to be careful and silent, a sacrificial telescope, an experiment thrown into a crazy cosmos. This is how you learn to be a machine with brilliant 360-degree sensors ready to fold in on itself. to dart to refuge at any moment. He won't hurt you, they said, and then he does. And you learn that denial is a bluff behind which parents like these crouch in order to keep their special needs children needing. Windows boom open, doors splinter out into playpen rooms, and police think they are doing good. They who are summoned by next door neighbors who lurk and surveil behind ornate curtains and privets. Once, your mother peeled up her sleeve, showed you her first bite mark on her bicep, how she wore it like a medal, still dribbled in blood, virginal like the first of tattoos. She was always so proud of her pain, the church of her body attacked and glad, her arm forever rippled. He can't help it, she said. Their excuses like butter melt out of their drunk mouths. Even they can't swallow the promises you sip so timidly. Padlocks purchased, rooms padded. He senses fear, he said. What to do then when fear is the skin you live in? You wear your tremors on your fingertips like ribbons. Nothing's going to happen, they said. 17 years later, you dreamed of hallways like alleys, trying to summon the courage to make it to the other side unscathed. What else to do on a trail littered with landmines but sprint? You ran through the thick, and of course, here he came after you, and of course, your legs became syrup. One damaged minnow pursuing the other through a canal of hopelessness, both desperate, both mute. His face took the shapes of spirits our parents avoid mentioning. It might be hereditary. The ones who, when asked about, seemed to have slipped between the crevices of memory like oil, and you felt breath on the nape of your neck, his red fingers almost. We thought you knew he wasn't asleep yet. So you learn your parents are playing pretend, that there are no heroes in this house, or there are, but they are always late. When the arteries in his arms are already bulbous roots and his fists inside yours are already full of your hair, or the pads of his thumb and forefinger already gripping onto your earlobe, ready to rip the emerald from your body, and you are just about to be slammed against the hardwood like freshly caught trout. So you learn to be a bat, to pry open your ears and eyes and perch above the scene. So you learn that the people who drive you to school and feed you dinners are also clouds, bloated and breaking. So you spend your youth leaving and learning to find shelter under awnings called friends. And you meet a girl your age who winces too at her brother's flapping arms, who tries to hide her perspiring brow behind bangs she decided she needed. See how she wears her family secret on a multicolored puzzle piece pinned to her backpack? You invite her over, thinking you might slowly reveal yourself to her like an echo. And the day comes for her to arrive at the red door, but you spend the afternoon on the front porch, oblivious and waiting, because she is sure her story is different. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was absolutely beautiful. And I want to, before we talk, I just want to give everybody a look at your piece, because the formatting is so important here. And I think it's so beautifully composed. So if you have a chance, I really recommend also reading Sarah's poem, because the formatting is just spectacular and adds another layer to it that was also really exciting to figure out how to do in digital form. The internet hates poetry like this, and I was so excited to figure out how to solve that. And I think we did, and it looks amazing, and it's beautiful in all of its forms. I would love to know, Sarah, if you're willing to just talk with us a little bit about your creative process and how you come to write these beautiful poems.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Ariel, and thanks for just kind of believing in my work. I also just want to shout out to someone who is a guide and who prompted this piece. Her name is Seema Reza. She's a guide, she's a poet, she's an essayist. She is a wonderful facilitator, and she runs an organization called Community Building Artworks. And this comes from one of her workshops where she shared this poem by Amber Flame that really inspired the piece. So I really wanted to thank her, and I also wanted to thank my therapist, Dr. Blumenson, because she encouraged me to give this public reading and to kind of challenge myself to put myself out there. And also, she helped me bring this piece from kind of dream world to poetry. So I just wanted to put that out there. My process looks it's kind of fragmented and scattered. As you know, Ariel, I'm my daughter's primary caregiver, so I don't have like large, long swaths of time. But that is what it kind of lends itself to writing poetry. So I am able to kind of express myself in short spurts of time and kind of use my notes app to jot down ideas, when I'm waiting in the pickup line at her school or, sitting at the edge of the bathtub. So that is a lot of what my creative process looks like nowadays. Also, just like, sitting here at my desk and collaging with the baby monitor right there. And I would say that most of my writing is inspired by just finding words that I love and that like kind of speak to me, and making sure that I jot those down and taking it from there and seeing how I can weave those into ideas.
Yeah, there's something, thank you for sharing all of that. Also, it
Yeah.
gives me so much context that's so amazing to have when looking at your work. I think Sarah's also an totally incredible collage artist, and I think that there's something so beautiful to the idea of marrying a collage practice and a poetry practice. Like they're so harmonious with each other, and the way that you approach layout as well feels very compositional in a kind of fine art way. So I really encourage everybody to look at Sarah's collage work too, because I don't know, they feel very complementary to me. Do you think of them kind of as symbiotic in your work?
I think that when when I'm blocked in one area, I'll turn to the other medium. So
Yeah.
like if I'm experiencing writer's block, I'll just like sit at my desk and work with different magazine pieces, and vice versa. So right now I'm in a little bit of a lull collage wise, so I'll sit at my computer and make sure that I write.
I think that that what you said about like finding these small moments as well, to sort of jot down a note or a word, that's very inspirational as well. The idea that these things are kind of coming to you at all times is really exciting. And I wanted to talk with you a little bit about horror, because I know at first there was a question of like, are these poems horrific? And to me, this one so absolutely is. And I think like, as we were reading it, the violence of it feels so present for me. And I think that this piece really encapsulates the aim of Bloodletter, which is to publish all types of writing that tackle horror in a nuanced, broad definition. And I was just wondering, out of curiosity for you, like seeing your poem in the context of like Tori's essay and some of our other like directly horror genre related pieces, what you think of that juxtaposition, if you're willing to share.
Yeah, horror is something that scares me in a way that, like, I mean, obviously it is supposed to incite fear in many ways, but I haven't even allowed myself to really like um dive into it. Because I'm very sensitive person, and like if I see a scary movie, for instance, it'll stay with me for like months and months. So I have to be very careful about my exposure to certain scary things. But I will say that submitting to this issue really made me think about the ways in which the speaker of this poem is possessed, and what influences are controlling the speaker, and like what is actually like gripping onto this the speaker of this poem. And I think what I was trying to convey was that the speaker is just possessed by family, and by shame, and by this masculine figure, by um genetics, and also by this family secret. Um, and I think that was, I really welcomed that. I thought it was a wonderful like invitation um, on your part to have an issue about this topic as well, to kind of think of the ways in which we are overcome or controlled. Um, and yeah, I hope, and yeah, and this has been such a like, just watching, these talks too, and reading the issue, it's been a great kind of soft intro to horror. I'm able to kind of like, pick and choose what I want to read and not be so, horrified.
Well, okay, possessed by genetics. That's something that's a fascinating, really, really profound idea. I'm gonna that feels really correct for your piece. And I'm really, my hope in creating this magazine and creating these themes was that they would be broad and generative rather than stifling and restrictive in terms of what people would submit. And so possession meant I was hoping something really large, and the idea of possession through genetics is really amazing and such an exciting contribution to that theme. Thanks for bringing that up.
Thank you. Yeah, and it felt like a very, I'll just share that it felt like a very risky piece to put out there. It's a very like, I'll just say it's a personal piece. And as I mentioned, it's a secret, so it feels a little bit like dangerous. But at the same time, it's about an experience that kind of like calls for community and shared experiences. So it's like, wanting to connect. We all want to connect with people who are similarly situated. And I'm just thinking of a poet named Muriel Rukeyser, and she always says that like the only danger is not going far enough. So like if we go deep enough and we like touch on something that's like really deep and feels a little bit risky and dangerous, then that's where you want to go. And I think, I think we do that in our diaries or our journals sometimes, or we do that in therapy, but I think it's a whole other thing to put it out in the world, and to talk about it. So yeah, I'm just excited to be here, and I'm glad that I'm just thankful that you've held space for me to do something a little bit dangerous.
Thank you for being risky with us. That is
Yeah.
something I am very grateful for. And I think that's kind of, to me, that's what the community is about. I think horror is an opportunity to kind of connect over trauma, right? So, and there is a catharsis that is offered in sharing it. So I think, yeah, I'm really privileged to be able to put something out into the world that feels like it sparks that kind of wonderful nervousness that good art stems from. So thank you for that. Anybody have any questions for Sarah that they want to ask, or any comments? I'm so grateful to both of you for presenting tonight. And I know it was a little bit smaller and a little more in-depth than you planned, because we only had 2 presenters, but you guys filled this space so beautifully, and I feel so enriched and enlivened, and grateful to be able to publish your work and to create this space of community. So, and thank you to our audience members as well for being here to participate with us. I just appreciate it so much. So I hope that you have an amazing evening, and thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Bye, guys. Thanks, Sarah and Tori.